All right. Hello, everyone. This is the product design UX research sync for the editor group, and it is March 17th, and we'll jump right into the agenda. First off, Michael, I wanted to get just like just a quick gut check on the in-page search for settings and whether or not you felt like there was anything that we could do quickly to improve the experience before we turn off the feature flag, or whether we should just roll it out as is and iterate later, knowing that the next two milestones are pretty packed and we might have to live with it for a little while.
Um, so with how the setting search now per page, I think that's an okay experience. There are possible iterations on how granular we make this. Um, when we search for something and it's the text is within a block, how granular that block is something that came out of solution validation to be more narrow. But that I feel like could be handled in a separate issue iteration, what have you, because it's really good that we made that move to put the search at the top, because that has kind of led the design and exploration of how we could do search and like a more holistic search across all settings pages. Yeah, so far that solution validation for search is like I'm feeling confident about that direction. So we could tackle it then. But yeah, from the UX standpoint, like the other thing that came back was the highlighting of the content that could be handled as a separate iteration. I don't think there's any hard blockers, if that's what you were looking for.
Okay.
There are
Yeah.
little nicks and things like that to like clean up, but other than that, yeah, happy to go for it.
Cool. So I think the takeaway here is let's create some follow-on issues based on your solution validation and the ideas where we can take this for different iterations, which I agree that it opens up a wide number of options. Um, and then let's create one follow-on issue to just tweak the styling of the highlight a little bit. Try and get that in as a stretch for 1311. If we can get it shipped before we turn on the feature flag, then we will. And if not, let's just go ahead and activate it for everybody in 1311 and try and get it in 14.0 to polish it up. But just keep working, chipping away at the UX of it. Um, I think that it just somewhat related, but I was um, chatting with Marcel and we were talking about your concept for the settings and moving away from like the breakdown of the pages on the left to more of a tab breakdown and where the setting bar could be located in relation to that. And I think those are iterations that we should definitely be considering for like, the next group of work that we do in that area. So let's just get out ahead of this one, get the search in there since it's working. I haven't heard any negative feedback from the folks that have used it, and I can maybe well, man, tomorrow's the last day before Friends and Family Day, but I was going to post about it last week and realized it was Friday. Maybe I'll make a reminder for myself on Monday to announce it more widely to on GitLab Slack and just say like, hey, use this and give us some feedback, but this is going to be active soon. And and then we'll just turn off the feature flag. It would hit self-managed in 1311, but users on GitLab.com would be able to get it immediately. So cool. I'll update the issue with that decision, and we'll take it from there. And let me just make a couple notes while we talk about this next topic. So as we were discussing before we hit record, but there was a UX group conversation the other day, and settings and navigation came up. There was a good discussion, a lot of interest from Sid on the roadmap and what we have planned for 14.0. And as a result, Michael, you set up this Figma doc that just outlines sort of a consolidated look of what we would want to ship for 14.0. it's spread across multiple high level epics right now, and we're working, in a big push to get some of this in. But it was really helpful to look at that like singular design file and say, like, if we are able to achieve what we want to, it will look like this. So anyway, I just wanted to first of all thank you for putting that together, and I think we should do more of that as a company. Like, I think we get very granular iteration right a lot of the times, and we get some level when we have time and inclination, some level of like large vision work accomplished. But that in between, like, what's the 3 to 6 month vision look like that we can kind of chip away at, and when we come out of this iterative loop, we will have this. Like, that's something that I think would be really helpful for the content editor discussion as it moves into the wiki. It's something that I think will be helpful for a lot of teams. So, not meant to be bringing this up as criticism, like we should have done it, because obviously we're busy, and this is something the whole company needs to, work towards. But I think it was really helpful. So, yeah.
Really helpful for me too. And it looks great.
Thanks for that feedback. Yeah, I'll touch more upon this once I get into my design bit, because putting this together also taught me some other things that I want to take forth. So yeah, I'll let you voice your last point there, Eric.
No, I was just gonna document the takeaway from the first point. So if you want to move into that, the last point actually is a good transition, which is just the content editor wiki discussion is tomorrow morning my time. So maybe we can work on something like this for that. I think where we would get a lot of benefit from that is like framing it like it's not so much the MVC, like the smallest thing we can ship, but the and it's not the minimum lovable product, because lovable implies a huge amount of scope and everybody's really happy with it. But when do we feel like, what is this going to look like when we feel like it's ready for everybody to use for real work? Like this, it's the minimum, like, complete product, right? Like, what is this thing going to look like when we think it's really ready? What can we work towards? And that strategic vision, rather than like the long-term blue sky vision, is really important. So you can take over and chat about what you learned from that.
Yeah, I think what you said about the big picture, long term vision, something that you've explored using in the past was this whimsical platform, and to kind of like map out where things will go. I think like doing that kind of mapping along with some kind of visual um, side by side or like next to it at least could help with kind of that framing, saying like, oh yeah, we're doing this in this milestone, these blocks and those milestones, so that people have a clear picture. Maybe that's something that we can like um, work together on, in preparations for not only events like this, but like in discussions, pre milestones, things like that, that I can help contribute to, like, what's the latest views on this? Like, where do we feel things should land? And based on that, have some kind of visual talking points. So, yeah, I'll be better at trying to get that sorted for you in the future. I know that in the past we talked about getting some kind of vision stuff ready, and then comes 3 weeks later and it's like, oh, nothing, because like we get swamped with some other things and it's deemed less priority. But I think it is a good practice in general for transparency to just keep these types of documents updated wherever that may be, direction pages, whimsical or Figma or issues epics, whatever we decide to do. I think, yeah, just hold each other accountable and just like little nudges like, hey, I need something, because it's probably from my side, it's just like a cut and paste of multiple worlds, which is like the hard part, right? Like, because we're in the issues, we kind of know where everything is. But yeah, it's nice not only for stakeholders, but sometimes myself to see where how everything gets pulled together. Um, that said, dealing with settings and navigation, one of the things is like I'll get lost in rabbit holes. Like you start tackling one thing and then you start pulling, and then everything feels connected. So you feel like I felt like I needed to cover all the bases before like presenting it back or telling people what's up. And what I realized that some things, for example, like our plan to move the merge request approval settings into its own thing. But as part of that, we also listed a bunch of other things that could be done, such as putting in the menu link or like putting a link to merge request settings somewhere in merge requests. Things like that are like blocking the bigger thing, which is like moving the merge requests out of general and into its own page. It feels like those are very related but distinct things that my kind of own personal um yeah probably like experience would like kind of lump them together and present them together as one piece versus the spirit of minimum viable change where we can like release them as three separate issues. And then what I want to start doing is being more visible with like, yes, these are the three things I want to move with, but these points here are like I'm not certain yet, but we can probably move forward with these other points. And I think this is something that's come up in the last 2 weeks where there's strong direction and understanding of what things will be, such as like the flyout menu and what that label might be is another example. Where it's like, we just need to make a decision on this one little thing versus the rest of the flyout menu is like kind of cool. Like everyone's on board. There's no dramas, tested well. We're really confident about that. It's just like 4 words or 5 words holding back the whole issue from moving forward. So I want to prevent situations like this. So at least I can pull you, Eric, in, or Roman, or Marcel, or tech writer to help me kind of finesse it or say, don't worry about this. Like in the grander schemes of things, this is fine. But because I haven't been very clear with which areas we're confident in and not, it's been kind of like a black box, even for myself, because I get deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. It gets darker and darker, and then it takes me 2 weeks to get out. So I want to prevent that in the future. And over the next few days, I'll be looking at like moving along some issues. For example, the standardization of settings. There's a lot of things there that now that I'm pretty confident with hearing other people's conversations around settings that we can probably move forward with. And some things now I'm not so confident. So at least there's a clarity on potential priority. So whether we do them as our group or Eric, you group them in your thematic epics, we have, I feel like I have a stronger sense of where things land there. But yeah, for this week, it's just wrapping up solution validations for setting search. And this is where all the settings are in tabs at the top with a global settings search. Yeah, overall that felt like it was well received. And it's using existing components. So this was just like testing out the idea of a global search for things and not pushing the box too much with the UI or things like that. So yeah, we're leveraging a similar pattern that we use for our global search. So it's actually kind of consistent in a nice way. Yeah, and then yeah, over the next few days, like I said, tackling some more breaking down of issues and being more clear of next steps, and looking towards solution validation of web IDE tabs. And that's something that using unmoderated testing is where I'm aiming for, and being a little bit more focused with my questions to be more direct and around the solution can help turn around analysis time as well. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at over the next week.
Yeah, that all sounds great. I think that the element of breaking those down into iterations now that you've synthesized like this vast amount of information related to our existing backlog and our existing research is yeah, it's the great next step. And I think we'll have a lot more actionable issues coming out of it. And then, yeah, we can just prioritize and take it from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I will take a similar approach as well, because it took me a while. Well, actually, I kind of got lost in the sea of in the sea of research for a while, and then when I came up for air to create the deck and the video, it reminded me of like, oh, I did get kind of lost along the way. Like I was collecting it all, but at a certain point, I was losing track of like what I was doing all this for. So I think the same approach of breaking things down into okay, what we know and what's solid, and then the big tentacle things, like just labeling them that way and tackling them in due time is a way to approach that rather than kind of having them all mixed together and then you're like your hands are tied. So really great point there. Okay.
I think it's probably worth noting that we've only been the official stewards of the settings and navigation for a handful of milestones, really. Like, and part
It
of that
feels
was over
so
the
long
holidays.
somehow.
It does feel we've accomplished a lot. We've done a lot, especially you two. I've done very little, but we've done a lot as a group, and I think it's a natural cadence that we're following. So, yeah, I didn't want it to come off as, or I don't want either of you to feel like going in the weeds like that has been a deterrent to our progress. It was like you have to get that deep to form opinions and then come up and break it down. So I think we're coming out of that stage in a really good place, and we can start making stronger recommendations that are rooted in the research. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good what are we, second quarter for settings and navigation.
Yeah, that's a good call out. There was a lot to dive into because honestly, if we started with a lot that was kind of presented in the epics, the priority epics that we started with, we wouldn't really have known a lot of what we learned by now. We would have just kind of had the bias towards action. That is great after you kind of know the space and you know what are the key challenges. Now we can have that bias towards action.
We knew a lot of the problems. That's how I felt. Like there were a lot of like consistent themes identified as problem spaces. We didn't have baseline measurements to back up those assumptions, and we didn't have validated solutions and actionable insights that would make those problems go away. And we still don't have all of them covered, but like it's one thing to just say like people are confused by the left nav. It's another to say like these are the specific things that are getting in people's way, and we've identified repetition that needs to be resolved, and we've identified several areas that need to be renamed and reorganized. And the fact that it took a few milestones to get there is not surprising.
Agreed. Awesome. So I will move into my 2 points. Actually, I'll go with the second point first because it's just like an FYI on like, so after the baseline period is what I will call that. What I'm currently working on is evaluating some of the left nav proposals that have resulted from the research. One is the more exploratory approach. It's more of a bold approach to see how we can simplify the menu structure by creating these higher level buckets to contain all the different items that are on there. So there will be a lot of considerations in there. There will be a consideration of whether those buckets make sense, kind of the priority of certain items that are currently in the left nav, like do they all do they all need to be there per se, or are there other points where they can be discovered, or other like pages where you could surface it and things like that? So that will also come into that. And then I'm also doing a parallel. There's like this parallel work going on with docs, the left navigation in the docs that I'm working with them on doing a similar baseline measurement of the experience and then seeing how they can improve the IA there. So there's kind of shared learnings going on between the two projects, which is why I wanted to put that on your radar as something that I'm doing. And then the next area of things would be in the settings follow-up research area, because we kind of identified settings, operations, and analytics as these big hotspots of challenges, and operations is being addressed currently. So I see settings as the next area to dive deeper into. And in my opinion, analytics is a bit lower in priority because settings is like our second piece of things, navigation and settings, and we have all this other ongoing work. So that's the third one. And then the last one is just working on a proposal around how we can like maintain all this momentum that we've accomplished in terms of identifying challenges, getting into the cadence of testing and implementing things that we learned from research, how we can maintain that, and how we can better define the regions of navigation. So explain kind of the logic behind the relationships that are there so that other teams who might want to add things there can kind of understand how to make a decision on that behalf and understand when they need to conduct research. So that's, I guess, more on the documentation and handbook guidance piece of things, but that's another thing that I am thinking about. So I just wanted to put that out there. And if there's anything else that I should have on my radar, let me know, because I've been like in nav and settings world, but I know there are plenty of other things that we want to explore. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. Any thoughts?
This is great. I love this talk about the approach to proposing changes and maintaining. It's very much in line with how I hoped we would, where I hoped we would get as the temporary stewards of the category, and eventually somebody will want to take it over. But it's not. It's a shared responsibility, right? Like we don't ever want to be gatekeepers. But I do think I felt that we needed to approach this in a design from like a design system standpoint, right? Like we need to have consistent behavior and consistent components and a consistent way to create things. And so I think I'm starting to circle back around to that now that we've kind of built momentum around the top nav and we're realigning the left nav. I think this is a good next step to start thinking about that system that we put into place to help keep things consistent. So documenting in pajamas the types of components that people use, documenting the types of behaviors you might expect. But I think we could take this a step further, and we've started to seriously talk about the idea of data-driven settings and data-driven navigation. And in our last issue refinement or monthly, I can't remember where this came up, a friend was discussing the challenges we have with moving items around in the left nav. So I'm looking at your proposal for the more sweeping changes related to the buckets, and in my head I'm thinking, oh, that's going to be challenging because there's a lot of logic tied up in the left nav around what is visible to who and when, and like if the feature's turned off, what is the other default view. And his take on it was there's a lot of work to undo and untangle that logic if we took a couple milestones, stepped back, and built a framework that people could use to more consistently build the left nav. Then tackling something like this would be a lot easier and maintainable. So I guess put it another way, we could look at this epic and we could just execute on it, right? And we would untangle some code, but we would largely be punting on the tech debt that is making it hard for everybody to contribute consistent behavior to the left nav. So if we took a page from the Geo handbook and built a self-serve framework that's well documented, and you had a data file that essentially described the behavior of your left nav item, it would be a lot easier to write a handbook page that said, like, if you want your thing to do this, write this code, and here's maybe a template you can go off of, versus like having to write a XAML file for your navigation item and make sure you're implementing it consistently. That's a lot more overhead. Similarly, and this is actually something we were talking about for settings, and I know we're over, so I don't want to keep us too long, but I have an epic that we're just starting to discuss, like what that would look like for settings. And I think some of the larger things we want to solve for settings are almost dependent on us solving a data-driven settings model, because then we can experiment a lot more readily, we can scale a lot more easily, and people can be the owners of their settings without having to worry about how the view is structured, and they can just focus on the functionality of their settings and let the system and the framework determine where those are available and what they look like and how they behave. That way we can be consistent. It's a grand idea. I don't expect this to be solved in 2 milestones. This is probably something we would look at over the next year, but I think they're ideas that we should explore next.
Yeah, that was really great context. I'm excited to hear all of that, because yeah, that's why I want to get ahead on evaluating these proposals to see if it's something that could potentially hold up or be a direction we go for the future. Then we would want to keep that in mind, because that would involve so much reorganization and change that we would have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and I think the goal would be to empower groups to run experiments and run A/B tests and not have to worry so much about, am I going to break something by introducing this new menu item? It should be easier for us to figure this out, right? For us collectively to work on the left nav. And if we want to run an experiment where some people are getting persona-based or activity-based navigation and hiding certain elements based on context or something more dramatic, these solutions have been tossed around in the epics related to the navigation from before I joined the effort. But if we wanted to do those things, like, they're massive efforts just to put that in place given our current structure. But if we could lower that bar so that the growth team could tackle it, or the growth team in conjunction with another group could build an experiment more quickly, we could I don't know. It might be too ambitious, but hearing Fran talk about it the other day in relation to the left nav felt very similar to how I was thinking it would work for settings, and I think we could probably start with the left nav and learn from it before we apply that to the settings.
Awesome, that's great to hear.
Cool. All right. Before we go, this whole talk of like future documentation and all this stuff, we actually have an opportunity to start working on some documentation, i.e. the top navigation, because that's getting changed in 14.0. There is already like an area within Pajama that talks about navigation, where what I would like to do over the next few milestones is start, contribute is like fixing that, like updating that document. What my vision for this is explaining the rules of like how many action items should be in there, why things are laid out how they are, and like if you're a team and you want to add more items into there, that's probably where we're going to start putting some rules and recommendations. And this is probably where I'm going to look for your help, Eric and Catherine, to say like, what should the rules be around the top nav. But at the same time, this is also an excellent opportunity to start incorporating user research into pajamas as well, more prevalent, as in like we can surface like a block in there. So it's like this decision was also made by this like kind of general insight that we found in this solution validation or research validation, why we decided to group things like this or like section things off like this. Um, so I think this is a near-term opportunity for us to start like exercising this muscle of documenting before we get grand scheme on the left now, because that's a bigger beast.
Yes,
Sounds great.
yes. +1 to all of that. That's exactly what I was hoping for as well for pajamas. I linked to it below, Eric, if you haven't seen that page and you're curious about it.
Cool. Thanks. Great. Well, I kept you all too long. Thanks for. It's always great to talk to you, and we will follow up more and talk more about all these concepts in our next sync, and obviously within Slack and in the issues. So until next time. And also, given daylight savings time, we'll keep chatting on Slack about a new time for this meeting that works for everybody. But yeah, whenever that is, I'll see you next.
I had one point. If you have
sure,
a minute, I forgot about it. It was the first one, but I think Michael might have commented below about whether there's any existing data, because I know in general we will probably have an initiative around tracking usage for the whole menu, but if there's any existing tracking data, that would be interesting to look at.
I don't know of of like a direct answer for that right now. I'll have to look into it. I don't know of any events right now.
No worries. Sounds good.
But I remember we talked about this in the issue refinement, and it was relatively low effort to get basic tracking, but I was concerned that the basic tracking wouldn't give us the insights we were looking for as far as like the behavior that Michael was proposing, or like, are you clicking, which path are you clicking, and whether it's the collapse state or not. And like there's things actually on this one that we could, maybe this is a great topic for next time, but we could really benefit from some basic user tracking and then additional like actual moderated or like just observational testing, just like watching users interact with the left nav. Maybe, I don't know if our user testing platform has screen recording or not, but like actually watching their mouse go back and forth. But
yeah, it does.
I thought it did. Okay, cool. So that's a great topic for next time, and maybe I'll try and follow up before we meet again and see if we have any data. Certainly, while we're working in there, leading up to 14.0, we'll be writing events and things like that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, whatever time it is in your specific area, in whatever day it is. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, see you. Bye.